So, Congressman, what do you make of what we've seen so far in these releases?
Well, the law that Congress passed and President Trump signed was very clear. The Department of Justice was to release the complete files by Friday. The only redactions could be information that could possibly identify a survivor of Epstein's crimes or information relevant to an ongoing investigation. And the Department of Justice is not in compliance with that law. We've seen a partial release of the files. We've seen unexplained massive amounts of redactions. So there's a long way to go before the law is complied with. And we've heard from the survivors over the last 72 hours that they're frustrated, feel the rug was pulled out from under them. And I think when Congress returns in January, if the Department of Justice is not in compliance with the law, there will have to be a vote to rectify that and bring them into compliance.
So one of your colleagues, Congressman Jamie Raskin from here in Maryland, he's been talking about a potential impeachment of Pam Bondi, saying the Republicans are in control of the House, they're in control of the Senate. So when people say, let's impeach Bondi, let's impeach Robert F. Kennedy, let's impeach Trump or whomever, I say, bring me some Republicans and we can have a conversation. What's your position on that, Congressman?
Well, I think with respect to AG Bondi and this specific case of the Epstein files, I think you would have bipartisan support for either an impeachment or inherent contempt, assuming that the Department of Justice doesn't come into compliance with the law relatively soon. We saw a handful of courageous Republicans sign the discharge petition to release the files. We saw an overwhelming bipartisan vote to release the files. And I think it would be a very difficult position for congressional Republicans to be in. They'll have to choose between listening to the survivors who feel like the cover-up is continuing here or protecting whatever it is that Donald Trump wants to protect by not fully releasing the files. I think you would have bipartisan support.
I feel confident that you know what you don't know. Like, is it possible to know when you're actually getting all of the information, the right information? There's so much out there. How do you, as members of Congress, know that the Department of Justice is actually keeping to the letter of the law and releasing everything that it has?
That's a great question. There are some documents that we know exist that have not been released. Investigative memos, for example, charging memos that we know exist and have not been released or perhaps have been fully redacted in violation of the law. We also have worked closely with the survivors and their attorneys. And the survivors, as you might imagine, have a lot of information in terms of what happened and other individuals who were involved in Epstein's crimes. And we will be able to cross-reference what the Department of Justice releases with the knowledge and information that the survivors have.
Of the fact that some of this stuff was released, including a picture of Donald Trump, which does not implicate of anything, found in a desk drawer of Jeffrey Epstein that showed up on the DOJ site and then wasn't on the DOJ site and then showed up again on the DOJ site. Does that engender distrust? What do you make of it?
Well, I think this entire process has engendered distrust, right? And the administration started, well, even before the administration, Donald Trump campaigned on releasing the files. And then after he was sworn in, the Attorney General made a big show that she was releasing the files. You might remember she came out with the big binders that said Epstein files on there. Some point after that, we know the Attorney General went into the Oval Office and told President Trump that he's mentioned in the files. At that point, they started doing everything they could to prevent the files from coming out, and the cover-up began. So I don't think there's a lot of trust here. And with respect to the 16 files that were posted and then removed, I think there's questions that need to be answered. The Deputy Attorney General has said with respect to the one photo that included a photo of Donald Trump that there was an image of a woman and a request of the survivors that was removed. In other cases where there are photos that include a woman or who could be a survivor, they've blacked out that face to protect that person's identity. not removed the entire photo. So why in this case was the entire photo that included a photo of Donald Trump removed from the website?
Congressman, I want to move on to ask you about MPD. You were on the House Oversight Committee that's kind of had this back and forth between Democrats and Republicans over whether or not the Metropolitan Police Department was kind of cooking the books when it comes to crime statistics. The Republicans have accused the police department of doing just that. Are you confident that the police department was accurate in its reporting of crime statistics?
Well, first of all, I was a local government elected official 4 months ago in Fairfax County. I'm a believer that the government that governs best is that which is closest to the people. And in the District of Columbia, that's the mayor and the DC City Council. I'm a believer in home rule for DC. I'm a believer in statehood for DC. We're not there yet. So I don't think Congress is the right place to litigate disputes about the mechanisms and the mechanics and the operations of DC's government. That said, House Republicans released a report that, quite frankly, cherry-picked and mischaracterized the information from their own investigations. They interviewed 8 MPD commanders. Each of those commanders, current and former, confirmed that crime has been falling in the District of Columbia for several years now, long before President Trump's surge. That data is validated by the FBI data. That data is validated by the declining homicide rate that we've seen over the course of several years in the District of Columbia. It's not really in factual dispute whether crime was declining in the District of Columbia long before President Trump's surge of federal law enforcement and National Guard into DC. So, I find it to be a strange argument that Republicans in Congress are making. It's in complete contradiction to the facts and in contradiction to folks who live in the District of Columbia who have seen and experienced that decline in the crime rate.
Let's talk about the Affordable Care Act, because people on both sides of the aisle agree that something has to be done about health care. Of course, they differ on how to do it. There's this discharge petition that was signed by 3 Republicans from Pennsylvania and a Republican from New York, Mike Lawler, and they signed on with Democrats to extend the ACA tax credits for 3 years. And Mike Lawler said something really interesting. He said he thinks if the bill comes to the floor, not only will it pass, but it'll give the Senate the ability to come back with a bipartisan compromise and actually get something passed into law, which Senator Susan Collins kind of agreed with. How do you see this moving forward?
Well, I certainly hope that's what happens. I mean, first, I think it's important to rewind the tape here. Congress has known all year that this deadline, and the deadline is December 31st, is looming. And we should have been working on this in a serious way in January, February, March, April, May, June, July. But congressional Republicans blocked Democrats at every turn from extending these premium tax credits. Unfortunately, even though we got the signatures on the discharge petition and we could have voted before Congress left for the holiday vacation, Speaker Johnson sent everyone home. So we'll vote in early January. And I do think it will put a lot of pressure on the Senate to act. And look, I'm a supporter of a clean extension of the Affordable Care Act tax credits. I think the time to have that conversation about changing the structure of the Affordable Care Act tax credits was early in this year. At this point, people are already going to be seeing those premium hikes in January when they pay their health insurance premiums. And we need to act and pass a clean extension. And then if Republicans want, we can then have a broader conversation about healthcare costs and ideas to bring down healthcare costs.
You say you support a clean extension, but would you be willing to come off that and forge some kind of a compromise with Republicans that allows a temporary extension, but also implements some conservative policies that Republicans favor in order to reach a deal?
Look, if there's a vote on the floor of the House that extends the Affordable Care Act tax credits and doesn't do damage to the program or to other healthcare programs, yes. I support a clean 3-year extension. Would I support a 2-year extension with some income caps or other reforms to that program? Depending on the specifics of it, the answer is yes, as long as it doesn't take more healthcare away from the American people. We're already looking at $1 trillion cut to Medicaid looming because of the so-called big, beautiful bill. So we can't afford for more folks to lose their health care. That's not the kind of reform I would support, but a shorter term extension with reasonable changes to the program, yes, absolutely.
So you think that this can happen?
Yes, I think it can happen. Yeah, I think it could happen in January. Obviously, it's enormously frustrating that, we're late. We're turning in our homework past the due date here because the deadline is December 31st. We should have acted already. But I do think there's still the possibility that there could be a resolution in January.
Great. Thank you so much, Representative James Walkinshaw from Fairfax County. Appreciate you being here this morning.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
You too.